My dad said, "You have to work while your sister enjoys. It's that simple. And if you don't like it, get out," while Mom stood beside him, nodding in quiet agreement. So I said, "Great. Then I'll leave. And you can pay your own bills. It's that simple." At the time, my voice didn't shake. It sounded calm, almost casual, but inside, everything was splintering. I need to get this off my chest because I'm still processing everything that happened, how something I'd normalized my entire life finally snapped into focus. This situation didn't start that day. It had been building for years, quietly, patiently, layer by layer, but it all came to a head 3 months ago in the most spectacular and painful way possible. Growing up, I always knew my parents favored my older sister, Tessa. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't something you had to squint to notice. She got the bigger bedroom with the better sunlight. She got new clothes every season, while I learned how to make do and be grateful. Family vacations were planned around her interests, places she wanted to go, activities she wanted to try. If she was bored, plans changed. If I was uncomfortable, I was told to toughen up. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I'd prove my worth through hard work and independence. I wore that belief like armor. What I didn't realize was that my parents weren't just playing favorites, they were quietly constructing a financial and emotional system that depended entirely on me being reliable, self-sacrificing, and silent. Let me back up. I'm 28 now, and Tessa is 32. Our childhood was a masterclass in unequal treatment disguised as different needs. When Tessa wanted piano lessons, our parents bought a baby grand that took up half the living room. They bragged about it to guests, polished it every weekend. When I asked for art supplies, Dad handed me a small pack of crayons from the dollar store and told me to stop being dramatic and be grateful for what I had. Every summer, Tessa went to sleepaway camp. She came home with stories, friendships, souvenirs. I stayed home and helped Mom with yard work, cleaning, errands, because someone had to help. The pattern was obvious, but I kept believing adulthood would even things out. I thought once we were grown, fairness would finally kick in. It didn't. I went to state college on a partial scholarship and worked 3 jobs to cover what the scholarship didn't. I slept 4 to 5 hours a night, lived on caffeine, and learned how to stretch a grocery budget down to the cent. Tessa went to a private university that cost $60,000 a year, fully funded by our parents. She studied communications, partied through most of her classes, and graduated with a 2.7 GPA. I majored in accounting. I made the dean's list every semester. I walked across that graduation stage knowing I'd earned every single credit myself, and strangely, no one clapped as loudly for me. After graduation, I landed a solid job at a mid-size firm in Portland. The salary wasn't incredible, but it was steady. I was good at my job, respected by my team, and proud of myself. I moved into a modest apartment and started building what I thought was the beginning of my adult life. Tessa, meanwhile, moved back home. She said she needed time to find herself and explore her options. What that actually looked like was sleeping until noon, spending my parents' money on brunch and shopping, and occasionally applying for jobs she was wildly underqualified for, just enough to say she was trying. That phase lasted 2 full years. Then came the first phone call. Dad called me on a Tuesday evening. I recognized the tone immediately, the careful softness he used when he wanted something and didn't want to say it outright. "Sweetheart, your mother and I need to talk to you about something important." My stomach dropped. "Is everything okay?" "Well, that depends on your definition of okay," he said, forcing a strained laugh. "We've hit a bit of a rough patch financially. The roof needs replacing, and the medical bills from your mother's surgery last year are still piling up. We were hoping you could help us out for a few months, just until we get back on our feet." I should have asked questions. I should have asked to see numbers, statements, proof. I should have wondered how 2 people with decent retirement savings and a paid-off house were suddenly drowning. But I loved my parents, and the idea of them struggling made my chest tighten. "How much do you need?" I asked. "Maybe $2,000 a month, just temporarily." $2,000 was a huge chunk of my income. It scared me, but I said yes, because family helps family, because I'd been raised to believe love meant sacrifice, even when the sacrifice only ever went one way. The temporary arrangement lasted 4 years. Every month, I sent money. Sometimes it was exactly $2,000. Sometimes Dad would call with an emergency, the car broke down, the furnace stopped working, the water heater failed, and I'd send more. I started freelancing on weekends just to keep my head above water. My apartment was in a rough neighborhood because it was all I could afford after supporting my parents. I wore the same work clothes until they were threadbare, patched them up, and kept going. My meals were mostly rice, beans, and whatever vegetables were cheapest that week. I told myself it was worth it. I was helping my family survive. Meanwhile, Tessa got a part-time job as a receptionist. She worked about 25 hours a week and still lived at home rent-free. Her social media painted a very different picture: wine country weekends, trendy restaurants, designer handbags, expensive skincare. I didn't understand how she afforded any of it, but I was too tired to think too hard. The truth began unraveling last Thanksgiving. I drove home for the holiday, something I could only afford to do a couple of times a year. The moment I walked through the door, something felt off. The living room had brand new furniture. The kitchen gleamed with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. Out back, a new deck stretched across the yard. Mom caught me staring. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said cheerfully. The house was looking so dated. I swallowed. "I thought you couldn't afford the roof repairs." "Oh, that was taken care of months ago," she said, waving it off. "Your father got a great deal." Cold settled in my stomach. "How did you pay for all of this?" Dad stepped in, casual and confident. "We've been very careful with our money. Plus, we had some savings." "You told me you were broke." "I thought. You told me you needed me." That night, after dinner, after Tessa showed off a new bracelet from her boyfriend and disappeared laughing into the living room, I stood alone with Mom in the kitchen. "Mom," I said quietly, "the money I've been sending every month, what exactly is it going toward?" Her hands froze in the dishwater. "I told you, bills and expenses." "What expenses?" I asked, because this doesn't look like struggling. She turned toward me, guilt flashing briefly across her face before hardening into defensiveness. "We're allowed to improve our home." "I'm not saying you aren't," I said carefully. "I'm asking why you needed my money if you could afford all this. Your father and I know how to manage our finances." "Then why do you need mine?" The silence between us answered the question better than words ever could. She turned back to the sink. And in that moment, I realized everything. Such a simple thing, being told I was allowed to feel what I felt. It stunned me how foreign that idea was. No one had ever handed me that permission before, not once. I'd always been expected to be understanding, flexible, reasonable, the mature one, the calm one, the one who didn't rock the boat. The responsible child doesn't get to have messy emotions. She absorbs everyone else's. "I am angry," I finally said out loud, the words tasting sharp and unfamiliar. "I'm furious, and I feel guilty about being furious, which somehow makes me even angrier." Allison didn't flinch. She didn't try to soften it or reframe it into something palatable. "The guilt will fade," she said gently. "It always does. Anger doesn't mean you're cruel. It means something crossed a line. Give yourself time." I didn't fully believe her then, but I wanted to. About a week later, something unexpected happened at work. Jennifer, someone I'd shared polite hallway conversations and occasional coffee breaks with, asked if I wanted to grab lunch. We'd never been close, but there was a sincerity in her tone that made me say yes. Halfway through our sandwiches, she tilted her head and studied me for a moment. "You're going to think this is weird," she said slowly, "but you seem lighter, like you put something heavy down." The comment caught me off guard. I hadn't realized how visible my burden had been until it wasn't there anymore. I laughed, but it came out thin. That's one way to put it. Something in me loosened, and before I could stop myself, I gave her the shortened version: the favoritism, the money, the realization that I wasn't helping, I was being used. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to something darker: recognition. "My brother went through something similar," she said when I finished. "Different details, same core problem. Our parents convinced him to co-sign loans for our sister, told him it was temporary, that she'd pay him back. She paused. 3 years later, she defaulted. He was $40,000 in debt, and his credit was ruined. My chest tightened. What did he do? He walked away. From all of them. 5 years now. No contact. And he says it was the hardest and best decision he's ever made. Then she leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. I'm not saying that's what you should do, but people who treat you like an ATM rarely wake up one day and start treating you like a human being. Her words stayed with me long after lunch ended. I replayed them during my commute, while brushing my teeth, while lying awake at night. I kept asking myself the same question from every angle. Was there any realistic future where my parents suddenly saw me differently? Where they valued me instead of what I provided? Where I wasn't the safety net they could cut and retie whenever it suited them? The financial changes alone were shocking. Within weeks of stopping the payments, my life felt breathable. I paid off my credit cards, balances I'd carried for years, always hovering just above the minimum because there was never quite enough left over. When I added up the interest I'd paid over time, I felt nauseous. Thousands of dollars gone, burned, not on emergencies, not on survival, but on enabling people who didn't need saving. I opened a retirement account, set up automatic contributions. It felt strangely emotional, planning for a future I'd never been allowed to imagine. My future self deserved care, deserved the same responsibility I'd given everyone else. Looking for a new apartment felt unreal. I toured places with dishwashers, with air conditioning, with parking. One landlord showed me a unit with in-unit laundry, and I had to excuse myself to the bathroom because my eyes stung. For years, I'd lugged laundry 6 blocks to a laundromat, feeding quarters into machines that barely worked, telling myself it was fine. Everything was always fine. I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom in a quiet, safe neighborhood. The rent was $800 more than my old place, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to do mental gymnastics to afford it. I paid for the moving truck without panic, without guilt, without that familiar knot in my chest. Tessa found out within days. Must be nice to afford a fancy new place while mom and dad suffer. Her text read, sent from yet another new number. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Must be nice to be 32 and never have paid your own bills, I finally replied. She never responded. The guilt still came, but differently now, quieter, sneakier. It arrived late at night, when the world was still. I'd lie in my new bed and wonder if I was being cruel, if I'd gone too far. They were my parents. They'd fed me, housed me. Didn't I owe them? Then I'd remember Dad's voice, flat and final, saying Tessa needed more help because she wasn't as capable as me. I'd remember skipping meals, walking instead of taking the bus to save $2, canceling plans because I couldn't afford coffee. I wasn't capable because I was stronger. I was capable because I had no safety net. And they punished me for surviving. Dr. Laura Morrison helped me untangle that truth. Your parents made choices, she said calmly during one session. They chose to lie. They chose to take your money under false pretenses. They chose to give it to your sister. At any point, they could have chosen differently. But they're family, I said automatically. Family is supposed to mean mutual support. She met my eyes. What you're describing isn't family. It's a one-way extraction system with a biological connection. The words stung, but they also freed something in me. Around the 5th week, my Uncle Gerald called. I braced myself for another lecture, another appeal to forgiveness and obligation. Instead, he apologized. I should have said something years ago, he admitted. I watched the difference in how they treated you and Tessa. I convinced myself it wasn't my place. I was wrong. I swallowed hard. I talked to your dad, he continued. He's not ready to fully admit what he did, but he's starting to see it. Your mom, she believes, wholeheartedly, that Tessa deserves more and that you should provide it. Because I'm capable, I said bitterly. Because she's never seen you as someone who needs support, he replied softly. You've been the parent since you were a kid. That truth settled deep. I'd been parentified early. Emotional labor, responsibility, stability, and adulthood hadn't freed me, it had simply formalized the role into monthly payments. So I started imagining what I wanted. Travel, dating, hobbies, a life that didn't revolve around obligation. I signed up for a pottery class, bought real art supplies, went on real dates, turned my apartment into a home. For the first time, my life belonged to me. Then one evening, I came home to find my father sitting on the stairs outside my building, shoulders slumped, waiting. "We need to talk," he said as he stood. "No," I replied quietly, "we really don't." He asked for 5 minutes anyway. And against every instinct screaming in my chest, I opened the door.